Okay, so I'm in St Ives in the presence of Lynda Davies, writer, and a very good writer too. Her book, Just Me, I actually reviewed for the St Times in Echo. Your mother. Where do we start?
Where do we start with that, kid? My mother, brought up in North Wales, couldn't wait to get out of North Wales, and took me abroad for the first time with my father when I was 7 weeks old on a train all the way to Istanbul. And then she had me in her thrall until I escaped from a family home at the age of 10 to go to boarding school in Kent. That's how I see it.
Why did you go to Istanbul?
My father was in the Foreign Office, in the Foreign Service. He was a technical man, and that was the posting. And it was 2.5 years. I think 1.5 years in Istanbul and then 1 year in Ankara.
So we've got some local noise here. Was your mother involved in your father's work, or was she there just as his wife?
No, she was there very much as his wife. She was an attractive, elfin, black hair, hazel eyes, little thing. And she made it her mission to keep him in a job because he was her passport out of North Wales and what that meant to her. And we'll probably come back to that.
Yeah, she was called Byddig,
Yeah.
which is the Welsh interpretation of Boadicea, I think.
It is, or Victoria, because they were so convinced that Boudica was going to be victorious. So yeah. Buddig, Byddig.
And didn't she have some ancestry that had bards or
Yes,
witches?
we have a chaired bard in the family, and we can trace that Welsh lineage right back to 876 to a king of Wales whose name I forget now, because I never learnt Welsh. She would never teach me Welsh. I wanted to learn it, but I think she was trying to distance herself from quite a cruel past.
Was Welsh her first language?
It was, until she was 13, and then at secondary school she used to get into trouble if she spoke Welsh, and they would hang her slate round her neck. She met my father at school, where she was well known to be, in the words of my aunt, my father's father's sister, a bit of a nutter. There you go.
That's quite a good description.
It's quite a good description.
I couldn't have put it better myself. So how did this nuttiness manifest itself?
Oh, dear. In the book I've told a little bit about how, a woman could spend 2.5 days in a car driving from Beirut to the Dead Sea, and then when you finally get there, not get out of the car because there's nothing for me to do here, Norman. So wreck the day. She had a capacity to wreck a day. A joyous sunny day could turn to ash with one glance of hers, or her terrible cooking, or just, she just had that ability to fry something into oblivion, frankly.
I think one of the lines that you used to quote was when you were in Peking on another posting, and when visitors came and wanted to go up to the Great Wall.
Yeah, no, that's it. No, it was the Ming Tombs.
Ming Tombs.
We set off for the Ming Tombs. My brother, who's 8 years younger than me, in the back of the car. She's packing up bloody awful Heinz tomato soup. That was her preferred picnic. And my father said, and then she said, right, so where are we going, Norman? And he said, we're going to the Ming Tombs, Byddig. And she went, oh, not the Ming Tombs again, Norman. And I had spent 2.5 days on a train from Canton to Beijing at my own expense, got off the train, and she says to me, welcome to the dump. I was 24 years old, and I'd spent all my first few months of income, from my job, getting there.
So you spent a lot of your childhood being, moving around these different locations,
I did.
including Moscow.
Yeah, I did. They did Moscow. I've done Moscow twice as well. Yeah, I went in 1957 when I was 3, and I have quite clear memories of Moscow at that age. And then again in 1973, at the beginning of the big Cold War, Brezhnev era. Yeah. My father had nothing but nasty postings in all the hardest places. I think it's because he was so diligent. He was a very good technical engineer, and he was incredibly loyal and straight. And I think, to his great misfortune, he was married to somebody who was erratic, to say the least, in mood, in behaviour.
How did she get on with the other diplomatic wives and people? Was she sociable, or did they think she was normal?
I think that what she did was always try to better herself and curry favour with people out of her reach, with the senior wives. But she certainly had nothing but distaste for anyone lower than her. She wasn't kindly to people she considered inferior.
She displayed classic snob behaviour, didn't she?
She was snobbish with nothing to be snobbish about. And I irritated her because I went the other way, and I made friends with the ambassador's wife, who took me to underground theatre, who, embraced me, and I was teaching poetry at the University of Moscow at 19, and she couldn't understand why, when I didn't really care for the royal family or all of this kind of stuff and my socialist principles, I should be getting on and up. It drove her nuts.
She certainly manifested a very dark energy, and I think a lot of people came into contact recognised that. Do you think she was a witch?
I think that there was definitely lineage in that Welsh matriarchal lineage. I think there was. And I know from only anecdote that her mother was cruel on every level towards her, drowned her kittens when she was at school, barbaric cruelty from another age, from a medieval age, quite frankly. But instead of seeing that she had a passport out of that and a joyous life, in these places with enough money, with accommodation found, she was never really happy. And she was licentious and critical, and I was her puppet. I was her plaything for those first few years of my life, no doubt about it.
She certainly seemed to dominate Norman, and I can hear the way you say Norman.
I know.
It's almost like a command.
It is. It's become a catchphrase for people who know me, that actually it's become a joke, because there's only one way to treat that kind of behaviour, and that's as lightly as possible, because otherwise it is very dark. It's very dark.
But she was, in a way, striking looking, a bit like Betty Davis. I mean, was she how was she with other men? Was she flirting with men?
Yeah, she was flirting with men, and then as soon as she could, she had a long-running affair from when I was about 5 or 6. I was aware of it till I was 13. Then she had the option to marry this man because his wife had died of cancer or something, and she said to me, "What shall I do?" And I said, "I don't give a damn what you do, so long as I'm not split from my brother," because I'd virtually brought my brother up. I'd kind of protected him from her. I felt that he was very vulnerable, whereas I could stand up to her at personal cost, but I could stand up to her. Yeah.
And how was she with your boyfriends?
If she liked them, she was revoltingly obsequious and fawning on them. if I produced someone who had any element of testosterone or balls, spunk, she would either want to get into bed with them, or she would try to wipe them out. And you're a classic case in point. She called on all the furies where you were concerned, that's for sure.
Yeah, there was an incident in Florida much later that still amuses me, and the fact that I survived it is
a miracle.
is why I'm now writing my Be Lucky book. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah. So we had a daughter who was 2.5, and I was in the early stages of pregnancy with the second, and really sick. I mean, so sick. So we flew to bloody Florida, which seemed to me to be full of dead fish and manicured lawns, and we didn't like it at all. And again, we paid for that. Anyway, that's another story. Where they had a condominium, which was a sort of little house with glittery furniture and fish motifs and stuff. And I was forced to tell them, both my parents, that I was pregnant because I really couldn't face the food. No, I never could face the food that she cooked. But it was a Sunday, and she was proposing that we eat roast pork. Norman, she said, I've got roast pork. And your face, you'd had enough by this time because she'd been devilish. And you said, I am not eating roast pork. And I said, oh, for God's sake. She also chose that day to tell me, and I have written about this in Just Me, of the death in an apparent train crash in Germany of the boy that I grew up with in Beirut, whose parents adored me, showed me true love, and I was really thrown and so sad that he'd been dead a year before she chose to even mention it to me. You, meanwhile, go to the fridge, get a yogurt and a small spoon. My father's in the kitchen. You sling a towel over your shoulder. We're sitting outside on a little kind of terrace apron, and there's a lake in front of us with all the other condominiums around. And you stride towards the lake, at which point my father appears on the terrace from the kitchen. He says, where's Bob? And I said, he's going for a swim. At that moment, thank God, a duck or a goose or something like that flew across the lake, and suddenly there was this huge, like, rumbustious thing, water flying everywhere, like that, and it was gone. And I thought, what the hell? And Dad said, Big, what are you doing? What, didn't you tell Pop about the alligators? And we just sat there, this roast pork congealing on my plate. And, yeah, you survived. But there had been a notice there. There were notices all around the lake, but there was one missing in front of their condominium with a sort of hole where it had obviously been standing the night before. Beware alligators. No swimming. There you go.
I think she'd gone and taken that sign out.
She had.
And that's
she
why
obviously had.
I can see the funny side. So I now consider that an assassination attempt on me.
Yeah, you're probably right. Yeah, I don't know. I would imagine she could also work at long range. In fact, I know she could work at long range.
Yes.
Because she tried with me. She tried to scupper the fact that I made a pact with myself that I would not allow this chain of misery and whatever it was to go on, and I would cut that, and I would love my daughters. I would just love them, support them, and encourage them. And that must have driven her insane, to be frank. And she was so nasty to me. Do you remember my Christmas present the year when I opened 6 paper plates?
I don't remember that.
And
Remind me.
Then, so everyone's got presents.
Yeah.
The girls have got hideous dresses because they lived in Virginia. That's where they retired to. They lived in Virginia in a place called McLean. which was a dormitory town for Washington DC.
Also a safe house for all the spooks.
My father's final posting was in Washington DC, and he was really pleased to end on that high note. Anyway, where was I? Sorry, I have to cut.
Paper plates, but
yes,
she wasn't a great cook, was she?
No, she was sent these blooming parcels at Christmas, and all the girls were around. They must have been, 5 and 8 or something like that. And they said, "Oh, Mummy, what's that?" And I opened these 6 paper plates and I chucked them across the room like a frisbee. And I went, "Oh, Mummy, well, there's another parcel here." And it was slightly smaller and a bit heavier. And that was 12 side plate paper plates. So there we go.
I shouldn't be laughing, but...
no, but that's how it was.
But I do remember once she cooked a curry. That was the old school, wasn't it? The Frey Bentos.
It was, no, what she did was she cooked mince so that it was grey. It was an art form, believe me. Then she'd get desiccated coconut, a few raisins, a bit of, I don't know who made that curry powder, that would be stirred in. And then you'd have the great joy of putting desiccated coconut and raisins on top of your grey curried mince. And that was a curry. Believe me, the book is all about food, because that was the worst thing for me, being deprived of flavour, living in all these fab places, and her, she just didn't care about it at all.
That's right. When you say it now, I mean, your book, Just Me, a lot of it takes part in Paris, and there's kind of quite detailed, explanations of what you're eating and the tasting. It's very sensual. So I kind of get that now that you've been deprived of any of those culinary pleasures.
Yeah.
So what's your next book, Lynda?
I think it's going to be called The Time of My Life. And it's going to be about those episodes in life that are in the in-between times, the subliminal time, which is when creativity comes. And because I've been a travelling child and a travelling adult, and always felt somewhat not unattached but free spirit, I have spent many times in places that other people wouldn't even notice, and I think they're treasured places. So I've got chapters called Laundrette,
Good title.
Bus stations, benches, coach stations, calves. Yeah.
Well, we look forward to reading it. Thank you, and be lucky.
Thank you.